So I asked Mr. Lutz the same question. Criminal law is sort of a family affair with you. Was your dad a real influence in you getting into criminal law?
Yeah, he was. It was something I grew up with. Since I was young, I always was around, and being around the house, you were always around when those phone calls came in at all hours of the night, and you know, you knew when your dad was in court and watching him on TV and talking about cases, and often I would go to the courts and sit and watch him.
So obviously, you, from a very early age, you had an inkling that you would want to go into law?
Yeah, you would think so at first, but actually at first it was something that kind of went off my radar. But once I got out into the real world for a while, and then I realized what it was really all about, then I decided to go back and went back. And
maybe those middle of the night phone calls, or what made you sort of think initially that it might not be such a good idea?
Yeah, there was certainly some aspects to it that, you know, you kind of questioned or whatever, but it was always exciting. It was always, you know, it was always something very special to know that your dad was handling one of the big cases in the press, and it was always fun watching him go into court. It was always fascinating. I was talking to him afterwards, you know, with the court cases, and we'd talk about, you know, why certain questions were asked or what strategies were taken, and you know, why the judge was leaning the way they were leaning, or why they were asking the questions they were asking, and it was yeah, it was really interesting.
And now the shoe's on the other foot. Dad's retired, and you're taking on these big cases. How do you handle the pressure of going into court when you've got like a really high-profile case that the whole city is, sometimes the whole country is watching?
I don't find it overly that pressure, really. I mean, because you just make sure that you're properly prepared for everything, and you just do all the work and all the background that needs to be done. And when you walk into court, it's time to just put everything into place and to do it. So it's actually quite exciting. I don't find actually the court work all that much pressure, to be truthful. I find it very and stimulating and very exciting, actually.
And that's part of the problem, that the public doesn't realize that so much more goes into criminal defense work than that stage at the courthouse before a judge or jury. Does it frustrate you that people don't understand how much hard work you have to put into to represent one individual?
Yeah, I don't know if it frustrates me. I mean, I know they're not aware of the process. It's one of these things that it's, for example, a jury trial is always kind of fun in the sense that when you do the jury selection, you'll sit in this courtroom, and usually there's anywhere, depending on the case, anywhere is up to 200 to 300 people sitting in the courtroom, and as they get called to come up before you, and they're deciding whether or not they're going to be on the jury or not, you can just sense the apprehension, and they're just hoping you're going to tell them to stand aside, or they just don't want to be part of it. But after they get involved in the process, it's one of the things that part of my jury dress, I always watch them through the trial, and you can see how they all of a sudden start understanding the process a bit more, and they're getting involved more, and they realize that they are a big part of the process, and anyways, they enjoy it a lot, and you can see. But so, as in many members of the public, they start learning exactly what is involved in these trials.
I guess that's one of the joys that you get to take 12 strangers who have little knowledge of the law and basically educate them over a week or two. It's certainly different than going in front of a judge who may or may not know the law better than you, but they always think they do. Is there a reward just in knowing that you engage 12 average people in the whole legal process?
It is, actually, it is, and as I say, it's one of the things that I like to do at the end of the trial, and like to obviously thank them for their involvement in the process. And you can watch them, they watch you, and they're nodding back at you, and they, you know, you can tell that despite their apprehension that they first felt when they were in the jury selection process, I think they were glad to be there and be part of the process.
A lot of defense work involves people that are on the edges of society, marginalized people, but they're also the people who need the most help. Is that another part of the work you do that you find rewarding? Or
it is. It's you don't get it in all cases, but there's a lot of cases, and obviously I've been doing this a long time, and so I have some fond memories of some cases I did, and I'll never forget one gentleman that I acted for who had a very significant substance abuse issue, and he just kept coming in and out of the system, and he would be charged and whatnot. But anyways, eventually we got him dealt with, and he got treatment, and he got everything behind him, and he wrote me a letter saying, if you don't think you're not important and that you don't have an impact on people's lives, he says you're wrong. And he thanked me for everything that we had done for him.
Yeah, I guess since the odds are already stacked so much against the defense bar, I mean, first of all, you're dealing with an opponent that has unlimited resources, but they're all already, you're behind the 8 ball basically to begin with. Most cases aren't going to be winners. Is there a real rush to get to a case that you do win, and you basically reward your client for all his troubles by getting him or her out of trouble?
Yeah, it is very rewarding. It is very satisfying. I mean, especially one of those cases where somebody is being charged and aren't guilty of what they were charged with, and they're absolutely terrified of the consequences that they're going to have to face, and to get into a courtroom and watch them, and just you can feel the relief that they have when they're acquitted, and yeah, it is very rewarding.
Is that fear something that rubs off on you when you're handling a case? I mean, when your guy's innocent, but the case just seems stacked against him, and I mean, so much is on the line. I mean, obviously, you want to do your best for all your clients, but one that's clearly guilty, it's chips fall where they may. But do you have cases where you say, boy, I mean, I have to win this one, it's so important?
Right, and that's when the pressure does come on. I mean, cases where, as you say, where somebody might be guilty, even in those cases, it's it's mitigating things for them, and making sure that they get out of this with the less amount of difficulty as possible for them, so down the road that it doesn't come back and affect them as much. Because a lot of people do turn their lives around. A lot of people that come before or come into our office, they're just ordinary people out there that have made bad decisions, have got themselves into bad situations. They're really good people, but they've just messed up, and they just need this taken care of, and once they do, then they can move on.
That's something that the public really doesn't understand about what defense lawyers do. You're not just there to try to get the guilty back on the street, but you're trying to make sure that they're treated justly.
Right. It's a matter of people a lot of times, and often I'll get asked, especially if you're in a high profile, very heinous case, if I can put it that way, and people are saying, how can you defend these people? And it's a situation that you're defending the system. You're not really defending, or necessarily defending, you are defending them, but you're defending the system. You're defending the system that if this person is going to be charged with something that's very serious, a very serious offense, and they're going to be spending significant time in jail and whatnot, you want to make sure that everybody, that the state and just has to jump through the right, go through the process properly to make sure that they're not getting railroaded, that somebody just can't walk down the street and pick some guy and say, hey, you're being arrested for this, and he goes into the court and there's nobody there to represent him, and to make sure that all the rules and everything is being followed.
When you look back, are there any particular cases that scream out as something that you'll take with you for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I mean, obviously one of the ones that always jumps out at me is a case I did quite some time ago in the 90s, middle of the 90s, but I had a client that was charged with murder, and he was acquitted at the end of in fact, he was acquitted at the end of the preliminary inquiry. The Crown hadn't met the onus to even put him on to trial. And unfortunately, about 8-9 months later, he was arrested on another murder. In fact, this one he was charged with second-degree murder. And we ran that one, and he was acquitted on that one too. We ran a successful self-defense, but it was kind of rewarding because everybody was out for this guy. I mean, he'd already beaten one. Everybody wanted to make sure that that didn't happen again. And at the end of the day, though, it was a situation where he was defending himself, and we successfully argued a self-defense, and he was acquitted. So yeah, that's always one that's will stick with me.
Obviously, there are times where you work your butt off to get a client off, and 6 months later they walk back in the door and say, "Guess what, Kim? I've been charged again." I mean, how do you deal with people like that?
I don't know. You shake your head and you kind of laugh with them and you say, "That's okay. Don't worry. We were here before. We're here again. I guess we'll go through the process again, and hopefully this time, maybe next time you'll get it right." But the bottom line is it's like a lot of people, they fall off the wagon and things happen, and yeah, they come back. But you always want to make sure they know you're there for them.
And what do you tell people when they find out you're a defense lawyer and they think you're pond scum? I mean, defense lawyers definitely have bad reputation with some members of the population. How do you deal with those people?
A lot of those people have their minds made up. You're never going to change their minds, so you can argue, with them till you're blue in the face, that what you're doing is really the right thing, and you're just part of the process, and everybody thinks that you're just representing these people and looking for loopholes. That's the big phrase, right? You got somebody off because it's a loophole and whatnot, but yeah, everybody's got their opinions, and you just let them have their opinion, I guess. And
criminal law is often quite emotional. It's often people committing horrible acts against other people, often people that are loved ones and whatnot. How do you deal with the emotion of the job?
To be quite frank, if you're going to do this job as a defense lawyer, you need to learn how to put that emotion behind you, and I mean, it is tough. It's I've done cases where, at the end, I've done cases at the end of the case where your client has been convicted of something very, as you say, very heinous and whatnot, but you have both sides. Everybody's crying, and I've had cases where even the families of the victim or the complainant, are standing at the end of the case, are standing behind your client, and they just really want them to move on and to learn from this experience and make sure they don't come back. And yeah, they can be very emotional.